Water is not just a South African problem, it's an African problem. It is the lifeblood to industry. It's already recognized as one of the top 3 risks in South Africa for business continuity. There's a deeply systemic interaction between water security when you don't have a reliable supply, and it also results in insecurity around job creation, job retention. And of course, the larger enterprises will have the resources, but not the small guys. They will be the ones who will suffer first. Water is often just seen as an input, but actually that is an ingredient. It takes 15 tons of water to make 1 kilogram of beef. One of the most frightening stats I saw was the fact that 40% of water that comes out of the dams is lost. That's a ridiculously high number. There was a sense that the supply of water is somebody else's problem. And this is something that I think as South Africans, we've got the people, the appetite, and we're ready for the challenge.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Safripol Water Security Engagement Forum. Now, across South Africa, the manufacturing sector relies on water not only as a vital ingredient in production, but also as a core process utility that underpins supply chains and industrial performance. Ensuring secure and sustainable access to water will be critical for the health of our industries and the stability of the economy over the next 3 to 5 years. Joining me to discuss these issues is Clive Hitchcock, commercial executive in South Africa's polymer sector. With his deep expertise in customer partnerships, supply chains and export markets, Clive will share insights on market signals, on risk and the practical steps required to build greater resilience in manufacturing. Clive, it's so good to have you with us today. And maybe let's start right at the beginning and at the source, because I think at a boardroom level, C-suite level, often when executives think about water, they think about water as this cost to a business. And sometimes they don't really make the connection to the strategic importance of business. So maybe you can just talk us through that real relationship between water and manufacturing.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, no, absolutely. Water is often just seen as an input, but actually in most industries, in fact, I struggle to think of one industry, even service industries, where it's not absolute lifeline or blood to their business.
Yeah.
It's both a utility and a processing material. It can be used in the cooling of factories, in the transportation of materials within factories, and also as an ingredient in the production of materials itself. So, yeah, the reliability of a water supply is going to become increasingly strategic and actually is key to our industrial competitiveness as players, not only as South Africa Inc., but as individual companies within South Africa.
And I mean, your experience in this space, maybe you could just share a little bit more about how you approach this, because you've got deep experience in building more resilient supply chains. And we've certainly seen since COVID how important that's become at a C-suite level.
Absolutely. I've had the privilege of working in many different industries through my career, from mining through to paper, through to water treatment, through to chemicals, packaging, and even textiles. And again, seeing the impact of disruptions in those supply chains that have taken companies down, that have also increased the cost of the manufacture, either through need to find alternative sources or to treat the water either incoming or outgoing. So I've seen it become, in my own experience, more and more elevated at C-suite level. But definitely it's going to become a risk more and more cited. It's already recognized as one of the top 3 risks in South Africa for business continuity. If we look at resilience in supply chains, where resilience refers to the ability to bounce back against shocks, exogenous shocks or internal shocks, compared to efficiency, it's going to become very important.
Interesting that you say it's already a top 3 strategic risk at board level. And I recall many years ago, around 2010, working on the water, energy, food nexus. And I think the World Economic Forum at the time was really starting to mainstream this idea of the interconnected nature of of water on the one hand, a key input in our food production, food security, but energy then in also treating the water, pumping the water from point A to point B. And all of those things, something happens in one of the, points of the triangle impact the other. Do you think we need to be doing more to raise the profile of the strategic importance of water at a C-suite level?
There's a deeply systemic interaction between those three things. Like you say, the provision of water actually requires energy, especially in alternative sources. The provision of energy requires water, sometimes in the generation of the energy, either through cooling, through actual turbines, or even hydroelectric, if we are using that. There is this interrelationship, and I've heard one analyst say that, water security water insecurity precipitates food insecurity. We can talk about water and food just now, but insecurity around the water supply will also result in the insecurity around the food supply. It also results in insecurity around job creation, job retention, competitiveness, etc. So there's this, like I said, deeply systemic approach that we need to actually get our heads around at C-suite level. That high-level strategic thinking and strategic approach has to be taken there. It can't be done on the operating floor.
Absolutely. That's where you do set that agenda, and you're hopefully looking into the future and seeing what's coming down the line and doing that scenario planning so that you can be prepared. And I also just, when I hear you talk about food security, I worry at a societal level. You think of the Arab Spring, and what precipitated that was a huge spike in food prices and food insecurity. And so I think, there's an important component that we really need to be mindful of as a society, especially given how arid South Africa is. But I want to come back to, from a C-suite level, if you're a board thinking about this, maybe you could just share your thoughts on where our strengths lie as South African businesses versus maybe more developed markets. Because, the one thing we have in South Africa is this famed resilience.
100%, Michael. I've had the privilege of being out of the country for the last 4 years, and I'm glad to be back. One of my learned experiences there is how, two things. Firstly, there isn't this deeply embedded resilience and capability that we don't frequently recognize that South Africans have to work through problems and find solutions. The other thing is that what I noticed in Europe was that there was a sense that infrastructure needs, the supply of things like water, is somebody else's problem. And this is something that I think as South Africans, we both have the resilience temperament, the ability to really work together when we get going, and secondly to know that we own the solutions ourselves. We can't rely on other parties to bring the solutions to the table.
And that has meant that we do tend to fare well when faced with these kinds of external shocks and challenges as well. But when it comes to the way we use water inside organizations, do you think there's an inefficiency with which we approach our water use? For example, using potable water where maybe grey water would be just as good?
100%. You've touched on something that's been on my heart for decades. So that, we flush toilets in our homes, and we would wash our clothes with the same water we drink. And really, that is an example of where we're not using fit for purpose, and obviously on a much bigger level that exists within the industry as well. So we use potable water for cleaning, cooling, etc., when most of the time a recycled grey water stream could be the case. And in fact, that's one of our biggest opportunities to address the problem in the medium and long term, is how do we build these recycling and reuse cultures and systems. The technologies definitely are there. They are sometimes costly, and that's, I think, one of the biggest obstacles to putting it in, but also this culture of that we have to do it. It's reuse waste streams. I mean, the acid mine drainage is a wonderful example where actually what was a waste stream has now, through a collaborative approach from industry, from the mining houses, have actually put in the necessary technology, facilities, and capability to reuse that and put it back into the system as industrial water.
I've actually visited the plant out in Imalahleni. Amazing, 3-step process using reverse osmosis, adding a bit of lime. And another thing you get as a byproduct of that is gypsum that you can then use in low-cost housing as well.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's amazing when you start thinking about these things just maybe more systemically and holistically, and you see these opportunities. What do you think are the trade-offs here from an engineering and a systems perspective? Is it cost? Is it consistency? Is it quality that maybe is preventing us from moving into redesigning our systems that are, maybe inefficient right now to more efficient systems where the grey water is driving the industrial processes and the potable water for drinking goes to where it should be going?
I think the problem in my mind, and looking at it from a systems perspective, the problem is linked to a number of challenges. Firstly, there's not one owner to the problem, and no one owner to the solution. There's many participants in the problem. There's many different stakeholders who've got different agendas, who want different outcomes. You've got a soft or fuzzy boundary to the problem, and then of course you've got this cost and regulation, the drivers that are preventing the activation. I think if some of the barriers can be taken down to actually implementing those solutions, I think the one thing about having a system approach and system solution similar to the water treatment we've just spoken about, you're needing trust, transparency, before you get collaboration, and certainly there you've got a smaller number of players who maybe trust and have a transparency because they're in the same industry and they have a shared objective. But if you take that to a bigger network of players, the trust is not there, and without trust you can't get collaboration. And certainly it's not supported, I think, at many municipal levels in terms of just facilitating the activation. I am hopeful, and I do believe that, again, based on previous experiences within power challenges and other areas, that the solutions will come through, and the right parties will be at the right table, but we'll wait to see.
Yeah, because there's a direct link here between water on the one hand and creating jobs on the other, and driving revenue for the municipality to provide the services that they want to its citizens. So, you would hope that local government bureaucrats are waking up every day and saying, right, how better can we work and collaborate with industry in order to achieve those objectives? Yeah. Let's just bring it to life a bit. Maybe you could walk us through an example of an industry or industries where water is playing a make or break kind of role.
One industry that I'm involved with right now is the beverage industry, where literally, and I'm not talking about beer, although we can talk about beer. I'm talking about soft drinks, water actually, where the supply of water in the beverage industry, soft drink and carbonated soft drink industry, that is an ingredient. All of a sudden, when you don't have a reliable supply, your ability to produce continuously stops, your ability to, your cost of treating the water incoming, you now have to go through to other alternative sources, and it all just compounds your cost and makes you uncompetitive. Sometimes in certain supply chains, the alternative at the worst case may be to import the finished product from outside the borders of South Africa, which then the whole of South Africa Incorporated loses out to. And that we do have a very real risk of hitting in certain industries.
That's frightening at a time when we're all thinking about, what can we do to be more competitive, create more locally made products and support local industry. That would be the net effect if we don't fix and grapple with these wicked challenges. But if water is so foundational, why do we broadly still see it and treat it as a secondary concern in risk planning?
I think it's because it's it's a little bit more hidden or a little bit more part of our endemic sort of day-to-day. We would treat other raw materials as in a supply chain context as being more critical because we know them, we buy them, and we'll see the invoices and we'll pay for them. But we tend to miss out on water because it's something that's always there and it's always part of our industrial processes. I think the other thing that we miss out on, and this is definitely something which is, I think, going to become more and more topical, is this concept of virtual water, where we miss the water that is actually contained in the products that we use.
Yeah.
So if you consider, one of the most frightening stats I saw was the fact that it takes 15 tons of water to make 1 kilogram of beef. And of course, that includes the entire supply chain, from growing the plants to feed the cattle to processing the meats through to the logistics and supply chain. But that's a ridiculously high number. And we, there's vegetables and water. Beer, again, 15 liters to 1 liter of beer. It's actually a scary thing. So if you lose groceries, if you lose vegetables in the supply chain, and I've seen the statistics again, 40% of vegetables are wasted in the supply chain when it's outside of the cold chain or protected with adequate packaging.
Yeah.
40% is waste. Every kilogram of cabbage contains a few kilograms of water. So this concept of virtual water, it's hidden, it's embedded in the materials we consume. If we could manage and reduce the wastage in our supply chains, that also becomes a water protection strategy.
A powerful one. Yeah. Extremely, but you've now made me think at the next braai I must drink a bit more beer and eat a lot less beef after those numbers. But it just shows you again, because often in the plastic industry, for example, we have this conversation around packaging. But it's that packaging, yes, if it's not recycled or disposed of properly, can end up in the environment.
Yeah.
But it's that packaging that is preventing food waste,
yeah.
which is saving water down the line. So these things are all so interconnected. And I worry sometimes that we may make decisions without understanding how all of these might have unintended or other consequences. Do you think we could do more through things like water footprinting exercises to make supply chains more transparent, to reveal and surface that information to decision makers at a board level?
Absolutely, and it's not just the packaging. It's also the secondary packaging, the crates, and the other things that are used in those supply chains. I 100% agree. I think that again, going back to my previous points about making this data more transparent, more believable, more openly shared, then we as an industrial community will be able to pick the most strategic points that we can collaborate on. Again, going back to the water solution of the acid mine drainage, that was a collaborative solution through a sharing of information. So I absolutely agree that the more that's profile or the actual measurements of what it really means, can be published, we'll be able to tend to more practical solutions.
Yeah. Just surfacing that and the transparency allows you to then make a better informed decision and also to understand, when you're dealing internally, but also externally with key players in the public sector, just how important this is. Do you think capital markets and financiers and insurers are starting to price this kind of risk into lending or insurance? It was very interesting, and I mentioned it in one of the other podcasts, that Gunther Thallinger of Allianz said, because of climate change, there's some categories, some geographies that may become uninsurable. If you think of what's happening in the Florida Keys and homes being wiped out by hurricanes that are now 1 in 5 year events. How are you seeing this being priced now into capital markets?
Yeah, certainly it's another risk element. And again, it's this reliability and expectation of performance that will be priced into the capital markets. It'll be priced into the cost of doing business. It's an additional tariff, an additional tax on the business. And certainly will be priced into the investment decisions. not only future investment, but also current investment. Is there going to be more investment into growth assets, capital equipment that will give us additional production output, or are we going to spend that money rather on prevention and protection assets, a water treatment system on our incoming? Of course, you produce more, you're worth more. If you're just protecting, your value goes down.
But then it also then feeds back into how companies are reporting and disclosing this through their ESG reporting requirements. Do you think we're going to see heightened focus now? I mean, and I've always thought, environmental, social governance, we look at the big E, but the S and the G are equally important here in South Africa. I think water has a huge social element to it. You think this is going to become more important as we move forward in ESG disclosure for corporates?
Without doubt, I expect that the connection to actually water security, to production output and bottom line profits is going to become more tightly coupled and more transparent. I think that is part of the problem, is that it's historically been, what do we do in terms of saving water, etc. It's been this, without dishonoring the message, it's been more of the softer issue. It's this thing, we're doing well for the environment, and we're nice to the environment. But actually the reality is, and going back to my opening point, this is strategically critical to ongoing business sustainability and resilience. It is the lifeblood to industry. Without over-dramatizing it, it is critical. It's like oxygen. The amount of water that is required for cooling data centers is considerable. You need to have good quality water. So even in offices where you need high HVAC systems, you need ablutions, etc. If you don't have that, it's going to impact those the performance of those companies.
So it's a question, I think, then of reframing the message as well. And, as the awareness grows, being able to reframe the message in such a way that helps us unlock the decisions and the capital to start redesigning our systems for greater reuse and more resilience.
Also, to remember that any company exists within a supply chain. So it's not only you as an individual company, but you are sitting in a supply chain that is dependent on you as a customer, or dependent on you as a supplier. And if you don't attend to those factors that bring you resilience as a company, you actually affect the resilience of that entire supply chain.
And thinking beyond your factory gate has got to become absolutely an imperative. I wonder where we might see maybe some regulatory incentives, maybe tax incentives that could be introduced, or risk-sharing protocols that might help drive investment decisions into the future. Do you think there's scope to innovate there?
There's not only scope, but a requirement to innovate there. I think the one thing that we've lived through the power crisis and the load shedding. The difference in my mind between power and water is power is to some degree scalable. Enterprises have the ability to, at some level, to put in an auxiliary power supply, whether they harvest it from the sun or they generate it themselves. Water is in a different category. You can't just create more water, and therefore you actually need to be even more proactive on the incentives and the other external drivers that can encourage that behavior to again reuse, reduce, and actually source water from every alternative source that is available.
So given that, it sounds like when we look at who's most likely to be hardest impacted or hit by water shortages, it's not necessarily the big users, it's the small businesses here.
Just going back to the power analogy, a small company can put in some inverters or a small generator.
A little diesel generator.
Exactly. And that's relatively low cost compared to turnover, so there's a proportionality. But a water recovery system, whether it's a water sourcing system, whether it's boreholes or desalination on the other end of the scale, extremely expensive compared to revenues, way out of the reach of most small enterprises. So they will be the ones who will suffer first. And of course, the larger enterprises will have the resources either financial or expertise or just leverage to work through the situation, but not the small guys, not the SMEs.
Yeah, and that is frightening. Yeah. I mean, just if you think of what SMEs have endured since COVID, and now you have this potentially on the horizon, and we really need to understand. Do you think at an industrial level, so maybe mid to large size corporations, most businesses do understand their water footprint? Are they measuring the right things? Do they understand what they're using, what they're reusing, what they lose, or is there still work to be done there?
I think there's a lot of work to be done. I think again, it's probably not been as high on the agenda as I would have liked to have seen. I think the investments into certain buffer storage or a reticulation system, strengthening the reticulation systems through repair and also outside the factory gate is still a little bit retarded in terms of the in terms of where they should be. We've seen certainly in terms of government and investment into the space, it's running years behind. But certainly at even at the bigger companies, I think that there's still a lot to be done, and they're not on the front foot.
Yeah, well, I think, the Alliance for Water Stewardship was one umbrella organisation that was mentioned in the series that businesses can sign up to, and their toolkits in those to help guide businesses along that journey of measuring their water footprints and understanding where they are. Let's turn now to plastics and polymers and their role here in contributing to water resilience.
In fact, if you look at every aspect of water, whether it's reuse, reticulation, buffer storage, building that resiliency into the water supply networks. You can see plastics being at play everywhere. It's an extremely versatile material. Plastic polymers, plastic resins. You've got pipe systems which can be made, which are higher performing, last longer, easier to install. So your cost per use is way lower than alternatives. You've got tanks, water tanks. We all know about those more and more.
Yeah.
Even at residential, in our own homes.
It's becoming a feature like solar panels.
Exactly. So, buffer tanks, and they're easy to install and can be connected up to systems quite simply. You've got applications around groundwater protection. So the membranes that go under waste landfills, under mining, etc. So in every aspect, and lastly, of course, we know your innocuous water or drinking bottle. That those bottles, and if you look at Cape Town, actually a PET bottle became part of their emergency supply strategies. So you can distribute water through plastic containers, whether it's a PET or HDPE container, especially if you go into outside of the urban areas where actually most containers are carried, not transported in a vehicle. You've got containers they don't break, they're lighter, they can be reused, they can be part of that return system.
Yeah, and I mean, just thinking about what you were saying earlier around virtual water, the packaging. The plastic boxes, for example, if you can keep blueberries safe and from being squashed, and you're preventing that waste, you're actually saving a whole lot of water that's gone into, putting those blueberries into the box as well.
Exactly. And plastic polymer crates are an important part of that. You can get alternatives. But again, there's a kilogram of water in every kilogram of wood.
Yeah.
So whatever material you're going to use, my encouragement would be exactly as you mentioned earlier, to make those statistics visible, to maybe approach the problem with a clear set of eyes without a pre-existing agenda, and really to just look at the facts and figures on the table. What is the most water-friendly solution that we have available to us in this country?
Do your life cycle analysis, do your water footprinting, understand the virtual water component, and then look at it objectively and be led by the the data.
Exactly.
And I think ultimately that's the world where we're heading into. Speaking of data, everyone's talking about AI, machine learning. Are there any innovations that we need to be aware of in the materials, polymer materials space? Maybe new membranes that are being developed with these technologies that excite you about the future?
Who knows where it'll go, and already we're seeing some opportunities. I mean, maybe the one AI example that I can think of is even the use of AI in detecting leaks, detecting the problems in the systems, not only in municipal reticulation, but also in industries themselves.
And more smart systems.
Smart systems. They will give us useful information to feedback quickly. Of course, outside of those industries and the developments, we will use AI on the development of the polymers, again, being fit for purpose. And I think that is the thing about being, we are actually a local resin supplier. We can attend to the challenges that sit here in South Africa and sit here in Africa, because water is not just a South African problem, it's an African problem.
Yeah.
We have already developed specific resins that meet those specific needs, both in terms of temperature, UV, transports, logistics, etc., the crates and those sort of things. What is suitable for our own supply chains?
And do you think we're investing enough in that technology? Is it still quite nascent and maybe just a little bit of underinvestment while we see where the best use case is?
No, I think we've invested heavily into that and the development. Again, it comes back. So the technology is there, the investment is there, the degree of collaboration between, again, us as a supply chain participant with our customers who are deeply involved in providing solutions for this water problem. There's a tight collaboration there, and it's a moving dynamic field. So of course, over the next 5 years, things are going to change, and we'll develop new things. But we're ready for the challenge.
Well, that's exciting to hear. When you talk about infrastructure, which specific areas of infrastructure? Is it piping? Is it treatment? Is it storage? Do you think there'd be the highest returns delivered in investing in these new materials?
Yeah. I think if you look at the challenge that faces us, the quickest return on investment and the quickest bang for our buck will be to get infrastructure repaired and buffer storage in.
Yeah.
So there we are. We're talking about pipes. The technologies, again, already exist to global standards. We're meeting global European levels in terms of performance. And they're easy to install and actually can be done using existing infrastructure. So we can pull pipes through existing pipes. We don't have to go and dig up new trenches. We can refurbish a lot of existing
That lowers
systems.
the cost to retrofit.
Exactly. Yeah. And then secondly, on the tank side of things, putting in buffer storage with tanks, whether they be 1,000 litres, 5, 10, 20,000 litre tanks, it's possible right now. That will give us our biggest bang for our buck. If we consider that 40% of water that comes out of the dams through the municipal systems is lost. 40%, that is far higher than the comparative arid market, let's say like Australia, which is less than 10%. Even if we were to get to 20%, that saved water will give us significant time to actually put into the other solutions into place, which are more medium and long term.
And that has to be an early quick win that we can implement in a country where we've already allocated 75% of our water resource, yet you're losing 40% of the stuff en route to the end user.
Yeah.
Are we seeing the requisite collaboration between the public and the private sector here on this one in particular, or is business still flying solo?
I've not seen the collaboration. I mean, I'm open to examples. But personally, we have not. I mean, in fact, we've seen limited appetites to push it forward at a governmental level. In terms of take the Lesotho Highlands water project. I mean, that's a decade behind schedule. The recent budget has put in a lot of money into into infrastructure build, which I applaud. I think that's fantastic. But even there, it falls shy of the investment needed to actually bring those projects to completion. So I have not seen a collaboration, but I believe that it also is up to industry as well to really push the envelope on this one.
And just to bring it back to a conversation we're having before we got into the studio, you were talking a lot about vicious and virtuous loops. So maybe you can just talk from a systems perspective about how you see these playing out potentially in the water sector, because it is so important to understand this.
Yeah. The water problem we have is what we call a wicked system. It's a system that has a lot of stakeholders, a lot of owners, a lot of weak boundaries. And within that wicked system, we've got, in my assessment, and I've done some work on it, we've got a vicious cycle, a balancing cycle, and a virtuous cycle. The vicious cycle is one that gets worse and worse and worse. Mm-hmm. So, for example, in this instance, you'd have a situation where there's a lot of leaks, companies put in their own water supply, the municipality gets less revenue, therefore less money to invest into repair, and the leaks get worse, and then it gets worse and worse. Right. The balancing cycle requires where there's leaks, the municipalities reinvest some of their revenue in stopping the leaks, and it sort of is like a thermostat. It sort of balances off after a while. And then, of course, the virtuous cycle is where there is a solution. Through collaboration, through sharing of information, the situation gets better, and then there's further collaboration because of those wins. The problem that I see is that the balancing loop in the middle, it does require the reinvestment of the revenue into the infrastructure. And if that is not there, then that balancing loop doesn't exist. And in fact, then you get sucked into that vicious cycle.
And why it was encouraging, at least, to hear the Department of Water Affairs DG Sean Phillips talking about that being a focus of national and provincial government. The mention of a treasury fund for use only if the accounting officer at the local authority can demonstrate that they're reinvesting back into the system was encouraging. Whether or not we actually see that happen in practice, well, I certainly hope we do. Just looking forward and to end off, I mean, if you were given R1 billion tomorrow to invest, where would you be investing to improve water resilience?
Again, the biggest win would be to get the infrastructure stabilized and rebuilt, to bring that resilience back in. We know that in South Africa we have lots of shocks and lots of turbulence, lots of volatility, both within South Africa, but also within the global arena at the moment. That is the.
Let's not talk about the White House.
No, let's not go there. But the reality is, I would spend a lot of money in building resilience. So it would be about rebuild the infrastructure, rebuild the buffer storage. Once that is done, I would then focus on the alternative sources. Establishing structures around use of groundwater as a source, but that also has to be done in a very controlled and managed way. Otherwise, you end up potentially polluting the aquifers with ingress of seawater. You deplete them. You could get some subsistence and some other challenges that come with that mismanagement. But you certainly can explore those, but they take longer. Yeah. And then lastly is actually better harvesting from a point of view of desalination and rain harvesting.
Yeah. And certainly desalination, a much longer lead time, capital intensive solution, but one that is certainly there for the future. The future of water is, what is the future of water as just a final thought for you, Clive?
The future of water is definitely something that will become more and more on top of mind. I am, for South Africans, I'm extremely encouraged and confident that we will find the solutions. I think that we've got the people, the appetite, and I'm talking about the general businessmen out there, the C-suites. We have lived and grown up and and prospered under decades of uncertainty and volatility. This is not new for us. So the future of water is actually, I think, secure, but certainly requires a different way of thinking, a different approach, collaboration, and creativity and ideas.
Fantastic. Clive Hitchcock, thank you very much for joining us here.
Thank you very much, Mike.
On the Safripol Water Security Engagement Forums. It's through these that we hope to build on that famed South African resilience and build that future together and collaboratively.
Thank you.
Well, in an economy that relies on strong industries, I think it's clear from this conversation that water is more than just a resource. It's the backbone of production and supply chains. As we've heard today, securing water security is not only vital for business continuity, but for the health and growth of South Africa's entire manufacturing sector. A warm thank you again to Clive Hitchcock for his insights into how partnerships, innovation and forward planning can really build resilience in industry. And to you, our viewer, whether you're in the factory, the boardroom or the policy arena, remember, sustainable growth flows from every litre saved, treated and reused. This has been the Safripol Water Security Engagement Forum with me, Michael Avery.